Hello and welcome. My guest today is Jonathan Breeden, the founder of Breeden Law Office. Based in North Carolina, his firm has become a dominant force in family law, servicing the local community with a relentless focus on clear communications and practical results. We are going to dive into how Jonathan scaled his firm from just 3 employees to 25 in only 5 years. We will also discuss his community-first marketing engine and why he believes that most law firms aren't actually suffering from a lead problem, but a management problem. Jonathan, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Alex. Looking forward to it.
It's our pleasure. Take me back to the 2020 and beginning of COVID. What was the milestone for your firm? What happened before and after when COVID happened?
You you go back, you start this growth thing starts back in 2016 when we changed marketing companies. We got rid of the FindLaw website that was not working because of things that FindLaw were doing back then. Some backlinking that was really being punished by Google. Alex, you may be too young for some of that, but people can remember some of those days. And so we switched to a company called Postali out of Columbus, Ohio, that we're still with today in 2016. And we quickly ended up with a website and a presence that was creating a lot more leads than we could deal with. So we spent 16 through 18, half of 19, basically working all the time, not understanding where the cases were coming from, not having a system for processing it, not knowing how to project income. So we were chronically understaffed, underpaying people, and sending a fair amount of work back to Raleigh. We're in the suburbs of Raleigh, North Carolina, and we were sending work to Raleigh, and none of those Raleigh attorneys were sending it back to me because they were keeping it and they were coming to the suburbs. So that's what was happening. Late 2019, we hired an associate, a very good lawyer out of Raleigh. I assumed her practice, and her and I basically doubled the business overnight. You could do that many more consults, that many more cases. She's a very good lawyer. We were off and running. COVID hit 6 months after we hire her in March of 2020. The world shuts down, and the business really gets cut, well, more than half. I mean, it was probably cut 70%. And,
Right.
So that was a tough time. But during that time, I just had 3 employees. I had 1 paralegal, 1 associate, and 1 secretary. But during that time, it gave me time to find a coach because I knew I needed a coach to try to help me scale this thing because I didn't know. I needed scripts. I needed to figure out how to track leads. Clio Grow was new then, and they were just sort of getting off the ground, and we really needed a way to be able to systemize what was happening because we had leads, but we weren't managing them appropriately. And so finding a coach was a big deal, and we found a coach in May of 2020, a guy named Richard James, and Your Practice Mastered. We're still in that program today. And that program started to teach me how to scale a firm, the things you need to know, the numbers you needed to know to be able to do it. And everything there started with leads, sets, shows, hires, paid in full, referral. Just this sort of perfect client life cycle, right? And you needed to kind of know what those numbers were so that you could then predict a cash flow in the future. And then you needed to figure out how to track your leads into some sort of CRM. I didn't really know what a CRM was. So you could figure out what advertising was working, what doesn't. Because the first 20 years of me practicing family law in the suburbs of Raleigh, it was spaghetti. You buy everything that walks in the door, you throw it at the wall, you don't know what's working, and you spend a lot of money on stuff that's not working. So anyway, so that's really how it got going, and it's kind of just gone from there.
I think a lot of lawyers, they focus on practicing law and less so on running the business of law. Now that you've been through that journey yourself and you worked with a coach and you understand the importance of tracking everything, what is your advice to somebody that has, they want to run their firm by feelings and they don't think that they need to track the numbers because everything seems to be working and referrals coming in, and maybe there is no pain felt that something has to be turned from the way they're currently running the law firm into actually making it a professional service business? What would be your advice to them?
Right. I mean, the sort of keep it small, keep it all, solo, 1 paralegal, do 500 or 600 yourself and make 50% profit is not a bad way to practice law. Okay. And I don't have anything against that. I did that for many, many years. But I did want to see if I could make more money, and I did want to see if I could get more control over my time. I
Mm.
had young children at the time. My children are now 16 and 13. When we start this scaling thing, they're 10 and 7, right? And I was working a lot. I mean, a lot. I mean, 6, 7 days a week. Because at that point, I was still doing the work and running the business, right?
Right.
So, there's the concept of being in the business and working on the business, right, Alex? And so
Mm-hmm.
I was having to do both, but I was in the business 9 to 5, and I was on the business 5 to 8.
Mm.
Payroll, hiring, interviews, networking, and then I was working on the weekends because whatever I didn't get done during the week, I had to work on the weekends. I mean, that's just what it was because it was tough. And so I thought there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a way to hire people, other associates. The associate we had when we grew the business, she left in June of 2020, decided she just wanted to stay in Raleigh. She didn't want to cover the suburbs. So she just took a job where she only had to go to court in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is
Mm-hmm.
fine versus covering the suburb counties. So, so we had to start over. And we started over with a series of young attorneys. We had the Great American Quit Out. Everybody went through that. So we had a lot of turnover among the young attorneys, weren't providing them enough support, probably wasn't hiring the right people. Grass is always greener somewhere else.
Mm.
There was some of that stuff going on too. So, but eventually we started to get it figured out. And it really turned for me when I was able to hire middle management. But I had to go through this sort of hell where I was still having to do work. I was having to manage, and I didn't have the money to hire managers. And I was not a very good manager of people, to be honest. And
Mm.
so, but once I got to the size, towards 2 million in gross revenue, and I could hire a middle manager to run the admin team and hire a middle manager to run the legal team, then I could then stop taking cases. I could get out of working in the business and I could just work on the business. And then the growth then sort of became even more exponential once I wasn't having to go to court. I wasn't managing 60 or 70 cases. I wasn't getting those calls on the weekends when somebody dropped their kid off at 6:30 instead of 6 o'clock, and all the things you deal with in custody and divorce law.
Right. So it sounds like one of the benefits of you going through that wasn't just about a business. It's just the quality of life for yourself that you could actually step out and rely on people to do other functions as well. Do you think it's something that could be explained, or do you think other firm owners need to actually live through it to fully appreciate why they need to take it seriously?
You know, it's honest to goodness, Alex. It's up to the individual, right? Like I wanted to scale this business. I wanted more control over my time. I thought that I was providing a level of service that other law firms in the area were not providing. And if you're providing a level of service that you believe is superior to what else is out there, you kind of have a duty to provide it to as many people as possible, to be honest.
Mm.
Sort of put positivity in the world, do positive work that makes the world better, right? And so, so some of that, but there's a lot of stress that comes with that, right? I mean, and it's very stressful to grow and scale a business, because you're going to have the turnover, particularly if you're dealing with young attorneys, or even if you're not, but particularly with young attorneys, and you're going to have to put some systems in place to be able to onboard, train, supervise, and offboard attorneys and employees as they come and they go. One of the things that was able to help us is we started getting employees overseas. So we started out with
Hmm.
employees in Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Then we got a couple of employees in Guadalajara, Mexico. And then we switched to San Salvador, El Salvador. We hired a company called Vivaro Nearshore. They're out of Anaheim, California. They own a call center there in San Salvador, El Salvador. We started getting our phones answered there. We started training a phone team there. We started making outbound phone calls to unconverted leads. And that really helped us. And then as we continue to grow, we hired 2 virtual assistants in the Philippines who now help us do pre-consult, post-consult, make scorecards, score consults, score the phone team, email management. I mean, they do a ton for us out of the Philippines now. And that was a way to be able to get some employees that didn't cost what Americans cost. I didn't have to physically find them a place to be. which is
Mm.
expensive in America because, commercial real estate is commercial real estate. And C, I found people that were more dedicated to the job. They wanted the job. These were good jobs, and they were very proud to have it and took pride in their work. And you don't always get that in these admin lower paid jobs when you're hiring Americans. Sometimes you do, but a lot of times you don't. And so that has been a big help too, is to get the employees in the Philippines and get the employees in El Salvador to provide support to us here in the US.
One of the things you said earlier is that it was a learning curve when you were hiring and expanding your team so rapidly over the last 5 years and learning how to hire members from the other countries as well. Having gone through that, what is your most prized lesson, something that you went through experience that you always think about and apply for every new hire?
That regardless of what happens, I'm probably going to be okay. I got a lot of anxiety. Sometimes I don't sleep the best. I'm going to be honest. The numbers get real, real big when you get this many people. You're talking about a payroll of $2 million, right? Like it gets to be big, and you got to go get that number every month, right? And that is a lot. But I have survived. I mean, survived. I don't know if that's the right word, but this business has continued to thrive through
Mm-hmm.
much turnover, many ups and downs, the economy. You know what I mean? If you just keep doing things the right way, if you keep providing a high level of customer service, if you keep marketing to people where they are and talking to them and answering their questions, in sort of this sort of ACE model of, author, celebrity, or expertise, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody should be thinking, how can I be an author? How can I be a celebrity in my local community? And how can I be an expert in my subject matter? Right. And so those are the ways that you can continue to attract, new clients and new talent as far as that's concerned. But the main thing I just tell people is don't quit, right? Like things are not always going to go the way you want them to go. And look, and I'm bad about this, and this makes me a hypocrite, but it's the God's honest truth. And I'm going to say it because if I keep saying it, maybe I'll truly believe it, even though I know it's the truth, which is you have to decide, is life happening to you or for you? Okay. And, I'm the first to be, woe is me, sky's falling, but that's not right. That accomplishes nothing, right? Like if you start thinking life is happening to you and not for you, you're going to get stuck and you're not going to move forward. The other thing that you have to do in business and life or whatever, is you have to figure out what is the truth, right? Because your truth is governed by all your biases, experiences, your childhood, all of that. And the truth is often not your truth that you're telling yourself. And so you have to figure out a way to get to the truth, whether it's talking to friends, family members, spouses, coworkers, reading, but like you just can't assume, just like you can't assume that AI is right because it's wrong a lot. You can't assume that your initial gut reaction to something and how you want to act is right because it's not always based on the truth. It's based on your truth.
There is a phrase I really like, strong beliefs loosely held. It's that whenever you have an opinion, it's good to have strong opinions in the things that, of course, relevant to your work or your life. But then if the evidence to the contrary is presented, you should be able to change your mind just as quickly to find the truth, what you're talking about. Would you be able to give an example of something that maybe you believed strongly before, but through that truth-seeking exercise, you changed your mind and you think about it differently now?
It's funny. If you wouldn't ask me that question, I probably could have come up with something off the top of my head. I can tell you that, I used to be fairly judgmental of people I did not know. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? That maybe had different beliefs in me, different lifestyles. I do family law, right? I see all types of lifestyles. I see swingers. I see LGBTQ. I
Hmm.
see a little bit of everything, right? I see sister wives. I see a lot of different stuff, right? And
Hmm.
I used to be fairly judgmental of those people, and I'm not now. Now I recognize they are people. Their beliefs have no effect on me. You know what I mean? Their beliefs don't really affect the law, right? I'm going to apply the law to whatever the fact patterns are, and I'm not going to judge somebody. Now, you get into some of these situations that you're like, I don't know how they got into this. But, what I'm just trying to figure out is were there consenting adults and were any laws broken? And if you got consenting adults and there were no laws broken, then it becomes just, Now, the consequences of how a custody case may go, because some of your lifestyle choices, the judge may not agree with that, and you may not get the custody you're looking for with your child, but ultimately it's still your decision. And so that's one of the things that I've really changed. And I accept all people now, where they are, who they are, whatever they want, represent anybody in any situation. If I can help them, then we're going to help them. And, and we're going to play the facts where the facts lie, right? They did what they lived, the lifestyle they lived, and how that affects the law and how it goes is how it's just going to go. But I'm not going to judge those people anymore. And so I think that has been one positive I've taken over the years as I mature and grow up, do a lot of these cases, get to know people, that kind of stuff, But one of the other things I would say, Alex, is if you're going to scale, you really have to have systems. And I guess you tried to answer me this earlier and I sort of went down a different tangent, but you do have to have different systems for different parts of your firm, right? You have to have an intake system, right? You have to have a defined way that a person who contacts you is going to be dealt with, and I think it starts with a trained person to answer the phone, whether they're in El Salvador, the Philippines, Costa Rica, or the United States, that's going to follow a script, that's going to allow them to build a relationship with the person calling so that they trust the person on the phone enough to book a consultation with your law firm. And I think that is the number one mistake law firms make. They don't answer the phone at all, or they don't answer the phone correctly. 80% of people are not going to leave a voicemail. They're just going to call the next firm. And that's why your phones need to be answered 24/7. I have live people answering my phone 24/7. I got a lot of friends who have AI that answers their phone 24. Somebody, AI or a human, needs to be answering that phone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
I'm really glad you said that, Jonathan, because I've seen this firsthand with the firms that we work, and through networking, I heard this story many times, is that there is a break in communication between an opportunity being generated for a law firm, whether somebody is contacting them, even sometimes a referral, and the intake. And oftentimes the easiest thing to blame is to say it wasn't the right type of client for us. That's why they weren't patient until somebody called them back, maybe several days later when their inquiry was urgent, or the agency working on the matter wasn't a good fit. Whereas the actual bottleneck of an issue, often that moment when somebody is looking for help, they're calling, and like you said, somebody needs to pick up, whether it's an AI or human, somebody needs to be able to communicate that. Is that something that was obvious for you from start, or do you have a story of how you also came to the conclusion of why it is so important?
I felt like, of course, it's the first tenet of any coaching program. There are tons of lawyer coaching programs out there that are excellent, and they're all going to start with the phones, because that's always the leakiest bucket in law firms, is the phones not being answered correctly. The next thing was you needed to get a CRM so you could keep track of the leads, and you could follow up with the leads, and you could email the leads and call the leads back, right? Lawyers in the United States cannot cold call. But if you call us, or you download our book, or we get your name through Facebook, I don't care. If I get your information, then I can call you till you die, buy, or unsubscribe, right? I just can. Now, I'm not going to call you forever, but I am going to call you for a period of time to see if I can help you and try to convince you that coming to talk to us is a good idea. And so we probably get 50 to 60% of our business now off of those outbound calls, following up with cold leads.
I think our audience definitely needs to hear that, how much of a percentage that could be, because most firms that stay smaller, whether it is their decision, again, to have a lifestyle law firm, and there is nothing wrong with that, but for the firms that are trying to grow and they're looking for a thing to fix, I think that's the number one. If there is a consent of somebody saying we want more information, you have the permission to start reaching out and see if you can help, and it could be a tremendous source of business.
Yeah, that's right, and I think that's like, if you don't answer the phone, somebody's going to answer the phone, right? If you don't get back to somebody, somebody's going to get back to them. And in family law, the buying cycle can be kind of long, right? Like, people will think about a divorce for 12 to 18 months before they ever call somebody. And then when they finally get up the nerve to call somebody, which can be the hardest call they've ever made in their entire lives, they need somebody on the other end that is empathetic and cares about them and is willing to listen and guide them along. The public needs to be told what to do, right? Like, that's it. Like, people are doing less and less thinking every day. They let Chat GPT think for them. They let Google AI think, Gemini, whatever. And so there's less thinking going on. I don't think that's good. That's just where we are. So you got to build an emotional connection because people buy everything with emotion and then they
Mm.
justify later. I don't care if it's $50,000 Lexus cars or $8 cups of coffee at Starbucks. It's all emotion that leads you to buy. And so you've got to be able to connect emotionally with people to get them to buy the service that
Certainly.
you're providing. And that is very important. And that starts from the initial contact. What lawyers don't understand is that they are being compared to Amazon. Customer service is customer service. Amazon will deliver ice cream, literally ice cream, if you live in certain areas of the United States. So think about that. Like, that's what the public expects, right? So if Amazon can deliver milk and ice cream, that's what they expect from your law firm. And you're not Amazon, but that's the expectation in their minds. And so the bar for customer service among law firms is kind of laying on the ground, as Joey Coleman says in his book, Never Lose a Customer Again. He's not wrong. And it doesn't take a lot to raise that bar off the ground, but you have to care and you have to design systems that focus on the client experience.
I remember when we were talking earlier, Jonathan, you said that so much as 90% of the success basically depends on client communications between the lawyer and the client. What systems have you designed that works well for you and for your team to make sure that young attorney, as you expand, they know how to communicate in a timely manner, conducting clear information to the client? What are the rules that you've established for yourself?
Yeah, well, the greatest invention in the world for us is Slack because it allows all of my team members, wherever they are in the world, and whichever one of our offices they happen to be in the Raleigh area, to communicate instantaneously. And
Mm-hmm.
so Slack is a great tool for small businesses and big businesses too, but definitely for small businesses. And so that has been a big help. So any young attorney can get an answer to a question pretty much immediately from a supervisor, from me, or from one of the more experienced attorneys if they're sitting in court. So you've got that support. I made a 41 point sort of onboard checklist for new attorneys, and we've made a bunch of lunch and learn type videos where we had them sit around for an hour and I stood there and talked, and we videoed it with my iPhone, and I talked about child support and custody and whatever. So they watch those videos. We help train them on how to do consults. We teach people to communicate to respond to communication within 24 hours, set realistic expectations. My young attorneys are meeting with their supervising attorney every week. They're going over every case, what needs to be done, what hasn't been done, what are the next steps. That's all important. Now, that supervising attorney does not have a caseload of their own other than just a handful of simple divorces. And so that's a big investment for me, but it's the only way that I've found to support these young attorneys in the way they need to be supported so that they continue to grow and they feel comfortable. This just generation, 25 to 30, right? I mean, they're looking for
Mm-hmm.
safe spaces and being safe, and they don't want to be vulnerable, and they want to work when they want to work, and they don't want to work when they don't want to work. And so you have to try to make it a good environment for them, because in family law, there's not enough attorneys, and there's for sure not enough attorneys doing family law in the Raleigh-Durham area, which is the number one place to live in America. A lot of magazines say. So there's a ton of
Mm-hmm.
people here. There's a ton of people moving here, but there's not enough people doing family law. So if you're not providing a good work environment, anybody that works for you can get another job tomorrow. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this balance between managing, getting them where you need them to be, getting them to hit their KPIs, and not having them go look for the next law firm that might have the same KPIs, but promises on the moon, and then they leave you. So it's a balancing act with these young attorneys and young paralegals that we have to try to work to make it work for everybody, for them and for the firm.
It's interesting that you mentioned that the supervising attorney doesn't have a lot of cases, so they can focus on helping and guiding the younger generation of lawyers. It seems like in a lot of law firms, there will be a very important function in the business, whether it is looking over the numbers, financial numbers of the firm, or even having a marketing function that will become additional part-time job of a senior partner. And then they don't have enough space to do that properly. And they have their own cases they need to look after, their own business they need to generate. With you making that separation, you mentioned that it is a cost that you have to incur, but it sounds like it's working out. What would be your advice? Again, just making sure that it's not one person wearing many hats, but that there are dedicated roles and functions within the law firm.
Yeah, I think that that's important. And look, when we initially hired the supervising attorney, they did have a caseload and they were supervising fewer attorneys. But as we continue to add attorneys, there was no way they could physically have their own caseload and supervise the other attorneys. So we had to take their cases away. And look, I mean, 7 or 8 associate attorneys can create a lot more income for a law firm than one supervising attorney. That's just the bottom line. I mean, this is,
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you're making car doors with whatever. Like if you create a machine where you got a lot of more people putting out product, it's going to be greater than a single machine or a single person, the product they can put out. And I think a lot of law firms lose track of that. And they ask that their supervisors also do a full caseload or 3/4 of a caseload and supervise. And that's a very difficult thing. And so I would encourage people to have their supervisors, especially if they're supervising more than just a couple people, not have much of a caseload and let them focus. Because my supervisor can go to court with the young attorneys, she can go to mediations with the young attorneys, she can jump on calls with, you know, unprofessional opposing parties and, talk to them and say, look, like we're not doing
Mm-hmm.
that, that kind of stuff. And I do think that that's important.
I had a guest on the Growth Switch recently that had sentiment that sounds you will probably disagree with it, and I'm curious about your thoughts. But the sentiment was that as the managing partner of the firm, that attorney wants to be the only one generating cases, and all additional attorneys should help with those cases, not necessarily focus on building up their own practices. I understand where that person was coming from, but it sounds like long term you disagree with that. You want everybody to build their networks and grow in their own right.
I would love that. Unfortunately, I don't have anybody that's doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to create all the work for this firm
Mm-hmm.
through my marketing and through my networking and stuff like that. I wish these young attorneys would take more time and start to learn and start to network more, but that's not what they want to do, right? They want to work 8:30 to 5:30, and that's really it. They don't want to go to an after hours or a breakfast and meet 15 or 20 people a couple of times a month. They don't want to go speak to civic groups. They don't want to go talk to schools. They don't want to go network with counselors and financial advisors. They just don't. I mean, they just don't. They just want to punch in and punch out, and that's where they're at. That
Mm-hmm.
we're going to find a way to incentivize them. I think the only way we're going to get people to do it is to pay them. I think we're going to have to give them billable credits to go and do that kind of work, or they're not going to do it. And I started this firm from scratch, right? I was 25 years old. I had to do that stuff because I needed to meet people. I needed to eat, like, is what it was. But they don't, right? Like, I mean, they've got plenty of cases being shown up through my marketing system and my teams and my systems. And so they're doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
there's some thought that says if people don't want to do it, don't make them. But I still think there is value in doing it because at some point you're either going to work for somebody who creates the business or you're going to create business, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
understand. I don't look. I don't have partners. I own 100% of the Breeden Law Office. I will always, at least as far as I know, own 100%. So this might not be the place for mid and late career attorneys that are looking for partnership and equity and all that, right? So, I mean, I'm constantly more than likely going to be training up young attorneys, and at some point they'll probably move on,
Mm-hmm.
where they get make more money or work for themselves or whatever. And I'm completely fine with that. I am still free. The ones that leave on good terms and give a notice and all that stuff, like I'm still friends with, talk to every week, right? Try to help them build their businesses. Like there's plenty for everybody, and I think that's what people don't understand. Like
Right.
even in a highly competitive market like family law in the Triangle, in the Raleigh Durham area, there's still plenty for all of us. So we don't have to hurt the other side or talk bad about people or whatever. Like there's plenty to be done. We just need to do a good job.
My guess would be that that sense of abundance, that there are a lot of cases and a lot of work, comes from the fact that you did build a marketing machine and you treated your practice as a business, and you set up systems so that you are getting those calls and you don't just rely on referrals. The first thing I want to double click on, something that you mentioned earlier, is that you spend a lot of time as part of the community, not necessarily just waiting for somebody that has instructions or they have a case and they need help now, but you focus on building a relationship with the community. Could you just explain your process and your approach to that?
Yeah, you can be of a community or in a community, right? And I'm a community guy. I'm from a small town, Laurinburg, North Carolina. My dad was the president of the Optimus Club and ran the Little League Baseball League. My mom was in the junior service league, all that kind of stuff. I mean, I watched my parents be a part of a community, and that's sort of where I learned it from. And so I have been in Civitan. I have done Special Olympics. I've been on the board of the local Little League for many, many years. I was on the board of the local community college for years. I was on the local economic development committee for a couple of years. I'm constantly giving my time and talents to the community to make the community I live in better. Johnston County, which is where I-95 and I-40 meet in eastern North Carolina. Those are the two biggest interstates in the United States. So a lot of people have been right through here and not even realized it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's something about, like, I think you have a duty to serve your community, right? And that's what I try to do. And in the process, you meet a lot of people. And if you tell them you're a divorce lawyer and they know somebody going through a divorce, they can refer them to you. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But it goes both ways. I do spend a fair amount of time going, and I enjoy going to Chamber of Commerce networking events. I'm going to one as soon as we get off of this recording. And, I'll meet 10 or 12 people I didn't know, and I'll get their business cards, and then I'll mail them a copy of my book that I wrote. And I'll say, hey, please give this book to somebody who might be going through a divorce. And, I get tons of funny stories about when they open it, they take the book home, and the wives are like, is there something I should know? Because the book's entitled Divorce Law in North Carolina, What You Should Need to Know. Funny, I sent somebody a book, they came by today, he hauled, tell me a story about their husband finding the book. So, and they're happily married. But I mean, I think that's ways to do it, right? Like, I think it's got to be more than just a business card, because you got to give them something, right? Like, everybody waits for somebody to give something to them. You got to give something. Give to the community. I give the books away, right? Like, maybe you read the book. I don't know. You give it to somebody and they think, man, thank you. You helped me. You know what I mean? Like you need to be giving something, answering questions, answering marketing questions. I had an attorney call me the other day about trying to find a new marketing firm. And I was like, well, look, you got to answer these questions as to how many cases you want before I can help you find a new marketing firm. Ultimately, it's not fair to the marketing firm if you don't know how many cases you want or how many leads you have now or how many you're closing. She didn't know any of this stuff, right? She didn't even have Leo. She was running everything through QuickBooks. I mean, and, you need a case management system that's not QuickBooks, but, that kind of stuff. So I'm willing to help anybody. I mean, competitor, not competitor, lawyer, not lawyer. I'm a mentor through the local Launch Johnston County, which is the business incubator group that teaches small businesses how to go, to scale and become self-sufficient. I'm going to spend the next 6 months meeting with a guy who owns a local mailbox store, kind of like a UPS store, but an independent store that has to compete with the UPS store. And I'm going to try to help him compete with the UPS store better over the next 6 months. I'm not going to get anything out of it, but you know what I mean? I want to help people. And if his business is better and he employs more people locally, the world's better. And that's the way I see it.
100%. I think that's a great sentiment. And this is something that you mentioned earlier in our conversation as well, that for things like the services, if it's a family law, somebody might be thinking about it, 12, 18 months before. And if the lawyers are being very transactional, they think, oh, if you have a need, come to me now, otherwise don't bother me, and they don't give anything back, they lose out on the ability to help and interact and make their community better, like you described. I'm curious, Jonathan, about the book, which I think is a great marketing asset for the firm. And it's also a great way to put information again in front of somebody that might need it down the line and is able to pass it. What was your initial motivation to write a book? Is that something that you always wanted to do, or what influenced your decision?
Well, I always wanted to do it, but I knew that I was never going to write one. So I was looking for different ways to get a book written. Fortunately for me, my business coach, Richard James, and Your Practice Mastered, had a book that I could use, that a ghostwriter had written for people in family law in his program, that would be the start. And then I could just change it to make it based on North Carolina. So it was way easier for me to take a book that was already written and change 30% or 40% of it to make it match North Carolina once it had a structure and it had chapters. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
So my wife and I took the book that the business coach provided, and most all these business coaches provide a book, right? Like almost all of them have one that you can use and convert. And so that's what we did. And we get the book published. I think it cost us $4.50 a copy.
Mm-hmm.
We sell it on Amazon for $12.99 or something. So some people buy it there, download it for their Kindle, download it off our website, breedenfirm.com. That's BREEDEN firm.com. We send it out to anybody that asks. We send it out to people that don't ask. Like, we're just trying to get it out there, because whether you hire me or not, the information in it is good. I answer a lot of questions that people need to know. Information is good. And I'm just trying, once again, to help, like put stuff in the public. If somebody chooses to hire me, great. My guess is the vast majority of people who read my book have never hired Jonathan Breeden, but that's okay too.
One of the other things that you're doing as well is podcasting. What led you to start podcasting? And because I think there is still notion out there that it is something very challenging or difficult to do, but personally, being in that space, I think it's a great way to meet with people, have interesting conversations, and I want to encourage more lawyers as well to do that. So I'd love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, we had a speaker who had a podcast company out of Florida come speak at one of the Richard James conferences a couple of summers ago. And he said that lawyers should do a community podcast and not just a legal podcast. Because if you do a community podcast, you could build a following that lasted well beyond any legal problems people had. And you would get exposure to people who didn't have a problem and didn't know you existed, who then might refer other people to you by raising your profile. So I hired a company out of Florida. They've changed names now. They've changed names. I'm trying to remember what they changed their name to. They literally changed their name last month. But it's a podcast company out of Florida that has helped me put out the podcast every week now for 2.5 years. And so what we do is I have a social media coordinator. We invite guests from the community, county commissioners, congressmen, small business owners, beauty queens, the Rotary Club, whoever we find interesting to come. CrossFit, we recorded a CrossFit one today. It was a local CrossFit. And so we shoot it here for video for YouTube in my office. We have a little setup. We got a couple lights, camera, and then we uploaded that to a Google Drive. And then the podcast company takes it and they chop it up and they put the words on it and they transcribe it and they chop it up into 60 to 2 minute, 60 to 120 second bits. So the podcast comes out on YouTube on Monday and on all the Apple, Spotify, whatever. And then every day of the week, a different cut from the podcast comes out. I have 365 a week year content from these podcasts. I do one a week. They're 20 to 25 minutes. And I've met so many great people and learned so much about my community and businesses and promoted small businesses and all of that. It's been a ton of fun. You're not going to get a lot of direct result from it, right? Can I say that John Doe saw my podcast and hired me? No, because they're going to say Google or a friend of somebody or whatever. But, that's okay too, right? Once again, I'm putting positivity in the community. This is a positive podcast. We interview candidates for office, county commissioners, sheriffs, whoever I think would be interesting to educate the public where we live. And it's been a ton of fun. We now have almost 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. And I'm just sitting in my office talking to people. It's amazing to me how many people, we have a couple thousand followers on Facebook of just me sitting down talking to people in my office. Like nothing fancy, but we're just talking to people. It's a ton of fun. And so I would encourage people to do a community podcast. Now, the law podcast guy and some of the law podcast companies out there would say, don't do that because then you're competing with Joe Rogan and the big podcast and Valuetainment and Rob Dial Jr. and all that. But I think people still want to learn about their community and see their neighbors, and they watch it on YouTube, and it's a ton of fun. And if we get something great, if we don't see something great, but the business keeps growing, and I got to think that interviewing these people has helped the business grow.
100%. I approve that message, and I wish that more lawyers had the same take as well and started doing that. Also, I think when it comes to making decision to invest into marketing activity, whether it's time or money, a lot of lawyers, they try to be over analytical, which is interesting because sometimes they don't necessarily measure, like you mentioned before, where their referrals are coming from, and they don't track that aspect of practicing law. But when it comes to doing something in terms of marketing, they want to see a very clear path between an activity and new business. And what we found is that sometimes that does happen, but not always, to your point. But the benefit that's definitely there, even if somebody refers your firm and a potential client goes online to find more information about the person they've been referred to, it's a lot better to have that out there than to have nothing and just trying to compete by saying we do great service with no evidence of any communications, not having those videos online, not having the face. I think putting yourself out there makes it easier for potential clients to connect, whether they end up needing something or maybe just referring business in a few
Well,
years'
right.
time.
And if they see me interviewing you and they're your friend, and they're like, "Oh, Jonathan Breeden, divorce lawyer, or whatever," like, and then they go search when they need a divorce or they want to recommend somebody, and they're like, "I know him. He talked to Alex." That kind of stuff. Like, it's
Exactly.
very, very, like, you want to raise awareness when somebody doesn't know they have a problem. Like, that's what podcasting does. It is not
Mm-hmm.
direct response. You're not going to get an immediate thing. And if you're doing just the law, your audience is going to come and go as they have a problem and not have a problem. Because I do the community, and every fourth or fifth episode, I answer legal questions because I need my own content.
Mm-hmm.
I can educate the public about family law while they're also listening for their neighbors. And then they know I become an expert because they listen every week, they're subscribed, they watch all the time. And so they learn a little bit about family law and find me to be the expert. We do that like once a month. And we found that works really well.
I think it's a great idea. And I remember Gary's V concept of jab, right hook. And I don't know if you're familiar, but the idea is when it comes to content online, you want to give, and then ask for something. And it sounds like this is the formula that you found as well, doing a community podcast more often. And then occasionally, here's the expertise, here's the insight, here's how we can help. And having that right balance makes it interesting. You're not losing your audience, you're only educating and making it easier for the right person to find you at the right time.
That's right. That's right. And like I said, it's and then we also use a company called Optimize out of San Francisco, and we get them to actually SEO the YouTube videos and put the
Mm-hmm.
tags on it and get a 100 score or 99 score or whatever. And so that makes the YouTube videos searchable. And some of these small businesses have no web presence really at all. So when you go looking for their service, what you find is their YouTube video talking to me because I optimized it and they've never optimized anything. So, there's that, right? It's just a ton of fun. I just love getting to meet new people. I enjoy going. I go on a lot of podcasts. I'm going to record 2 or 3 this week with you and other people. I just love spreading out information, meeting people, learning new ways to do things. I'm just a person who likes to learn, and I know I don't have it figured out. Believe me, I don't have it figured out. But I'm just constantly trying to be better and meet new people and talk about. One thing I also talk about a lot is you got to overcome your scarcity, right? Like we
Mm-hmm.
all are focused on scarcity because we are animals, right? We have, am I hot? Am I cold? Are you dangerous? Am I hungry? You know what I mean? Like we are animals at our core. And so that's going to cause some ingrained part of scarcity for survival. But you have to be able to overcome that as well if you're going to be successful in business and take a chance because the growth and the scaling is right on the other side of discomfort. And a lot of people don't want to go there. And so I do think people need to recognize that your brain is sort of wired towards scarcity and you have to work against that. That goes back to what I was talking about, your truth and the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Your truth has got all the scarcity problems, but the truth doesn't have that. And so you have to work through some of that too. And you also have to continually be making decisions to be better, Alex, and to be better and to be better and do something different and to provide a better service and whatever you're going to do in life. Because if you decide not to be better or not to do something or not to read the book or not to exercise or whatever it is, that's a
Mm-hmm.
decision itself, right? You're deciding to stay where you are. You think
Absolutely.
making no decision is comfortable, but it's still a decision. And you end up not being better, and that's not good. That's the way I see it.
100%. I think it's a great message. I guess to wrap up our time today, my final question for you is that you've certainly done a lot right when it comes to marketing. You've experimented, you tried different things, you've engaged actively with the community, you wrote a book, you have SEO and video content. What is the latest frontier when it comes to marketing in 2026 that you are currently trying to figure out and solve?
I've just gone to streaming TV ads as
Mm-hmm.
of January 1st. And we can't really get one-to-one attributions, but I can run these streaming television, connected TVs, CCT, whatever you want to call it, in households where somebody has searched for a family law related term in the previous 30 days. And we are unable to get complete one-to-one attribution, but we are able to track a few leads across the maps and stuff like that. But I can't get that it's Alex there exactly like I can get from a call rail phone number connected to an LSA or
Mm-hmm.
Google Pay Per Click or Facebook. But we are trying that. And one of the other ways you can see whether TV is working is the general search of your name going up across Google. Because if your general searching of you goes up and you can track a few leads through it, then you can figure out whether it justifies the spend to do the connected TV. But that is something we were not doing until just a couple of months ago.
That should be very exciting, and I hope it turns out to be profitable for you.
Yeah, I mean, and and then the other thing is for you to know whether it works, though, you got to know what a lead's worth to you, right? You got to be able to go through everything and figure out what is a lead's value, because you can figure out how many leads you got, even though I can't figure out that it's Alex who called, but I know how many leads I got, and then if I know a lead value, I can just multiply it and see is it worth the spend. And
100%.
at this point, I'm not sure, but at least we're starting to figure it out.
To figure it out. Absolutely. I think for many law firms that are listening to this and they're thinking that they need to be more active and not just rely on referrals, starting with the numbers is always the right move. Understanding the case value, understanding the lead value, and then figuring out attribution that can be challenging, but it's definitely a worthwhile problem to solve. Jonathan, I know you have a hard stop, so I want to thank you for coming today. I think you shared a lot of wisdom, so thank you for finding the time.
I appreciate it. Look, anybody can reach out to me. I'm on all the social media. It's Jonathan Breeden, Jonathan B as in boy, REED as in David, EN. Search LinkedIn, Facebook, Breeden Law Office on YouTube. Best of Johnston County is the podcast. If you're curious of what a community podcast looks like, be glad to answer anybody's question. Jonathan at BreedenLaw.com. That's a long debate as to what happened to BreedenLaw.com, but the website is BreedenFirm.com. Be glad to answer anybody's questions out there. If you see something, go see some of our YouTube videos. Like I said, I answer anybody's questions, help anybody. Appreciate you having me on, Alex.
Our pleasure. Thanks again for coming.